And I would just quickly add to that. I would just want to know why you help people if you can't help all people, because that's, and I think it doesn't really matter what your spiritual connection is or how you define that connection for yourself. When I sit across from you in a room, I'm here because I genuinely want to be here to help you get through what you're struggling with. And it doesn't matter that you've got some other intersecting identities that are attached to that. That's part of the process. And as we connect with all of those identities each of these individuals has, we see the whole person and not just like it was mentioned earlier about not seeing just the person as, I hope you don't just see me here as a trans person. I am a person who has these thoughts and feelings and stuff, so.
I think it's time that it's not an option. Stop giving that option. It's just like when you say resistant, that means like, maybe I don't want to. No, there are certain things that my employer says we will not tolerate here. You will not do. It does not exist here. And if you want to work here, then you have to be, you have to do what we do, or, you have to adjust, or, if you don't do that, then you can't work here, and that's it. I don't think it's optional anymore.
Find another job.
And just to add to that, I mean, recognizing that we're in a pretty populated county where there are a lot of social workers, there are a lot of folks who, when we're saying that to folks, that there might be somebody else ready to take that job who is ready to be affirming, but there are still places in the country where that might not be true. And so when Ruth Ellis Center does training, the way that we approach that conversation with an entire agency that's resistant, and there aren't other higher options, is to talk about, why are you here? You're here to help keep youth and families healthy and safe, right? And that's our goal. We can all agree that it's wrong for a child to experience homelessness or abuse. And so that's what this conversation is about. It's not about what you believe about LGBTQ issues, it's about safety. So if we can start there and start with the work there, and also look at best practices, how do we get the outcomes that we're looking for? We have to recognize the whole person, and that's how you're going to achieve better health and safety standards, is by reducing isolation, reducing stigma. So, next question is, how do you encourage agencies to use non-gendered forms, or what would an intake look like that would be more inclusive and helpful for LGBTQ youth?
I think what I would do is get the input from the staff. I'd look at best practices. I would certainly look at what the data studies suggest, but I would also get input from the staff, clinical staff and otherwise, to help develop this process, these types of forms that hopefully will be successful in gathering the right kind of information so that we could support and be affirming to our youth.
I think most populations that you're trying to serve, really they know what they need. They know what works best for them. And when you kind of engage them in those settings and those opportunities to share what would make them feel comfortable or what works best for them, you'll be surprised. You'll get pretty much what you need.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, really just go to the people that you're serving that wanna know, like, if I walked into a doctor's office, like the first time, so my first experience of seeing a form that had more than just male or female, I about passed out. It was at Portland State University where I did my undergraduate studies, and when you go into the health clinic, they ask you, how do you identify? Are you male, female, transgender? And they give you a list, but they don't just stop there. They also say, are you genderqueer? They ask you what your orientation is, how you identify. And so by giving people options instead of just two, and you can get that input by asking the community members themselves, like, how would you like to be, what would an intake form look like for you?
I wish we had an example of
Yeah, and I was just going to invite, if folks work at Ruth Ellis Center, could you raise your hand? And if anyone's interested in getting an example of how Ruth Ellis Center asks about these questions and what our intake looks like, please feel free after the presentation to check in with us, and we are more than happy to share that with you. Yeah.
And I always push that with folks about how to do the forms and make them more inclusive. But the simplest answer is always include a box for other. And then you can ask them why they checked that box or what they meant by it.
Next question is, Target is a major company that provides pronoun training to higher level staff in the store. Is this important? Should more companies try to do this? How?
Yes, important. It definitely does address the issue of misgendering. That's a big thing. That's a piece of it, and it's necessary. Misgendering is, you have misgendering, mispronouncing. So when it pertains to like pronouns, like if someone called me he and him, that would be mispronouncing me, misgendering me. That they're kind of similar. Because I clearly identify as she and her, but for someone to try it and be disrespectful or just unaware, or even if it's unintentional, sometimes people just aren't sure, but that goes into the education piece. Like, I don't assume people's pronouns. You know, if I didn't know who my mother was, what are your pronouns? Hi, my name is Imani. My pronouns are she and her. What's your name and pronouns? Kind of like that, to make sure that we're keeping that element of safety present. But yeah, it's important.
I definitely would agree that addressing pronouns is important. And I think where it starts is new hire orientations. I don't think it should be relegated just to higher ups. I think it's one of the fascinating things. Sometimes I'm really excited that I'm here in Michigan, and other times I think back of like, I'm so sad I left Portland. And this would be one of those things is that, sensitivity, if you will, training happened. I worked for a very progressive grocery store that allowed us to have a say in how things functioned. So in orientations now, all staff now go through a Gender Identity 101 training to be more respectful and aware of the different identities of the folks that they work with. And that's I think when you started at the beginning, you have a better chance of at least reaching some of those that are willing to be reached.
I do agree that it's important, and I think like some of the other panel said, it should start upon hiring and just that level of training and just add it to policy.
I believe Target is moving in the right direction.
So we only have 5 minutes left, so we aren't going to be able to get to all of our questions, but we wanted to end by inviting people to share what you're comfortable with in terms of what experiences you have had as a professional or personally. What personal experiences have you had that most inform you understanding the need for affirming LGBTQ2S services? And in the spirit of demonstrating vulnerability, I can speak professionally and personally as a person when I think about misgendering somebody or pronouns, that's not just about being politically correct, that misgendering someone is an act of violence because you are immediately jeopardizing someone's safety when you do that in this current political environment. And I know that because I lost a partner. And we've lost a lot of youth at the Ruth Ellis Center to violence. Life expectancy for trans folks is very low. It's a very serious issue. It's not about making people feel good or being culturally competent. It's about life or death. It's about safety. And so we hope that people understand and take that seriously when we're doing this work, because we know that you're doing great work and that you're here because you care. And now we have all these tools to start conversations and know what that looks like. So we could also hear from other panelists.
I guess, well, my personal experience is what's led me here today, what brought me to Michigan. I can remember one of my earliest experiences in the mental health care field, if you will, where I was hospitalized because they couldn't figure out why I was so angry. And then when we were in a therapy session, and the therapist, so I grew up in Arizona, in Phoenix, and so it's not cold there at all. And I spent a lot of time, many years in 100-degree weather, fully covered from head to toe because of the dysmorphic feeling I had about my body. And to only be sat down by a counselor, no one ever came close to diagnosing me with any sort of gender identity disorder or dysphoria. But the doctor, or the therapist at the time, looked across the table at my mother and said, "You need to teach your daughter how to be more ladylike." And I'm sorry, I just got a little, but those were the types of experiences I faced. I've been in a medical room with another trans person who has experienced horrible treatment by the doctor. When his scars were exposed, the doctor looked at him and said, "Well, what are those for? Why do you have those scars?" And when he tried to explain, the doctor looked at him and said, "That's disgusting." So it's not, we have a responsibility as caregivers to prevent these types of experiences any way we can. And that is by connecting with the youth, engaging with them, engaging with the families, and making sure that we're all safe.
Being who I am, being a trans woman has aged me. I'm 22, and I've had to navigate a lot in such a short amount of time in order to survive, so that I was not destroyed by opposition. I think one of the really big breaking points that really helped me to understand the importance of love and affirmation in any area is that I know personally and work with a lot of trans women of color who are survival sex workers and depend on street economies or survival economies to make it. And like, these are human beings just like everyone in this room who are forced to have to resort to different methods of survival that are much more stigmatized because they are viewed as inferior. They can't access levels of society as someone who is cisgender and who is already socially accepted can. These women can't even get the proper documents, get their birth certificates, because they're afraid to go on the spot, go into places and having to worry about being misgendered, being disrespected, and that's ridiculous. Why can't my sister get her birth certificate so that she can go and take care of her business, get health care, apply for health care? There are trans women who don't even have health care because they can't access it for whatever reason. Transphobia is a reality. If it does not affect you, does not mean it's not true. Just because you don't suffer from our issues don't mean they're not relevant or don't exist. So, that's a critical awareness piece.
I just wanted to just say a few words on this subject. I knew early in life that I was different, probably as early as 11 or 12. And I'm almost 60 now. And so for the last 20 years, I've lived my life openly, very happily. I wouldn't have it any other way. I affirm every day who I am. And I thank God, I have so much gratitude for my life today. And I think that knocking at the door at the Ruth Ellis Center, knowing that if given the opportunity to help just one young person not experience what I experienced, which was just simply being in the closet and suppressing so much of my emotions, my life, everything. I feel safer today than ever. And safety is really about what allows us to relate to each other. And so being at the Ruth Ellis Center is a blessing. The young folks there, I believe, are thriving because of where they're at in that respect. So I'm just thankful at this point in time in my life.
I just wanted to say real quick that on a personal level, it really, really, really hurts me to think that the message that I had given my son when I told him, that I always told him that you can be whoever you want to be and you can grow up and you can do, and mom and dad, or we're going to love you regardless. But when my behavior, like my withdrawal and my denial and during the time, my unwillingness to talk about that, it said totally different. You know, it was like, oh, I forgot to say, except for that. You know, we're going to love you unconditionally, and we're going to always be here for you. Oh, wait a minute, I forgot to say, except for that. And I feel like, at times, I feel like that's the message that I gave him. And it hurts me to think that now. That's why, you know, I want to say real quick that Family Alliance for Change is here for parents who are struggling and can help support families who's just not sure, who just don't know how. And it's not so much that they want to be resistant, it's just they don't know how. And we can be a support system there.
And we cannot half-ass this work.
We'll hear from Joe and then be wrapped up if he wants to have a last word. No pressure.
No pressure. My last word is just, I sit in awe at my panel members. I really thank you for your courage to say the things that you've said today and revealed, and for being here and doing what you do. And for, again, to all of you, just as I said earlier, thank you for coming, and keep up this work because the kids deserve it.